Pygmy Kavu is a curious little green creature that costs 4 mana and says when this creature enters, draw a card for each black creature your opponents control. I've always been curious about this creature because I've always seen it as basically a harmonized with potential upside because it is a creature body that can be flickered or reanimated out of the graveyard and so forth. But we're going to actually answer the question of how many cards on average will Pygmy Kavu draw you in any point in a Commander game. My name is Nathan, you're watching the Salty Productions YouTube channel. If you like this sort of content, leave a like on it and subscribe to see more. If you want a very similar video to this one in particular, I did a similar mathematical analysis for Subjugate the Hobbits, which is linked down below. So how do we actually collect the data for this analysis? Well, I went to the #1 source for gameplay on YouTube, MTG Mudsta, which I like because they play at a very similar power level that I typically find myself with my tables. And so we went through the 50 most recent videos on this channel and essentially established a protagonist, which is always the person in the lower left. At turns 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, once those turns actually came around to the start of the lower left person's turn on those specific turn counts, that's when we recorded our measurement for the analysis, and we went through 50 games. So we have n equals 50 for turn 4, but just a fair warning that some of the gameplays did not go all the way to turn 7 or turn 8, and so those sample sizes are just a little bit smaller. With that explanation out of the way, we can hop into the best software on the entire planet, Microsoft Excel. Here's the data set. I will also have this available for download, linked down in the description in case you want to view these numbers on your own computer. We have the episode name in column B, the name of the protagonist in column C, the number of opponents' decks containing black in column D, and the actual data we care about is in E through I, the black creature count on our opponents' boards as of turn 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, if I scroll over to the results, there is, on average, 1.6 decks containing black at the table, with the median being about 2. So I think we can probably safely conclude that there will be between 1 and 2 decks containing black at any given Commander table, at least based on this data set of 50 samples. On turn 4, we have a full sample size here of 50, where on average we're going to see about 1.5 black creatures on the board. So at this point, Pygmy Kavu is just a cantripping creature. For 4 mana, you get a 1/2 that draws a card. Not very exciting. Turn 5, this does increase to about 2, and I note that turn 5 has more instances of people playing their commanders that have a black color identity, and also a little bit more token production, which is why we see this number increase. So turn 5, sample size of 50, we can safely conclude that we're going to see about 2 creatures on our opponent's boards. Turn 6, it gets even spicier, where our sample size decreases just a little bit here, as there's 1 game without a turn 6, 7, or 8. But on average, we'll see around 2.9 creatures, black creatures on our opponent's boards, with the median being about 2. And here for this particular data set, I'd probably trust the average more than the median, and I'd safely conclude that we'll see about 3 creatures as well. Turn 7 actually does not change that much because the average only increases to 3.4, with the median being about 2 for a little bit of a lower sample size. But I think, again, we can probably round this down to about 3, where turn 6 and turn 7, now we've got more of a harmonized style of draw effect with Pygmy Kavu. And then turn 8, somewhat interestingly, has a decrease down to 2.3 creatures, and with the median being only 2. And what I noticed in my data collection is that 2 things happened. First, any deck that's playing black will typically want to be sacrificing its creatures, which I initially did not expect how much that would be going on within the games of Commander. So you have a lot of decks that are going to sacrifice their creatures for value. You also have board wipes that will happen between turn 4 and turn 6 or so. And then turn 8, you also get a lot more spot removal that's hit the board and taken out those very powerful commanders that contain black in their color identity. So let's jump to the graphs here, which go into this just a little bit more. So we have our same results here in column B and column C, and I just wanted to port those over so you can still take a look at this data as we scroll. But I did tally up for turns 4 through 8 here the frequency that we're going to encounter, and sort of gave it a little bit of a heat map. So here you can see the most common prevalency here. Turn 4 4 is most often going to be either 0, 1, or 2 creatures. Turn 5 most often is going to be between 1 and 2, and turn 6 most often is going to be between 1 and 4-ish. And we'll get into these distributions a little bit more as well. So let's actually talk about the distributions here, and I'm going to scroll just to the left a hair so you guys can see our graphs here. Okay, so turn 4, this is the distribution of the data. Now, it's going to be very rare that we're going to see a number of black creatures beyond 3 as of turn 4, just because people don't have enough resources in the early game to start spamming out a bunch of creatures. And so I think we can probably safely conclude that yes, we will only see about 1 creature, but there's going to be a lot of feel bad moments here with 0. This distribution is not very favorable, and I would be pretty sad to have Pygmy Kavu in hand and be looking to cast it on turn 4. Turn 5, it gets a little bit better. If you compare the top graph to the bottom graph here, we see just a little bit more of a board creation here as people get more resources, they cast their commander, but what we really see is a big spike around the 2 count here, and less around the 0 count. So this is where folks have cast their commander, maybe gotten like a Morbid Opportunist, or some sort of black setup creature, Warren Soul Trader, maybe something like that, onto the board, and now they're going to start putting their game plan into action. And also you can see here the different bars. I forgot to mention the yellow bar is the median, the orange bar is the average, and you can see here turn 5 they align pretty well. Turn 6 it gets a little bit more interesting here. Let me scroll to the right even more, and we see here turn 7 this graph goes all the way to the right, which I'll talk about in a second, but turn 6 I think is probably where we want to be casting that Pygmy Kavu, because the average is again 2.9, and here is where we start to see the distribution widen quite a bit. There was a particular game where there were 16 black creatures on the board, which would be absolutely amazing to play a Pygmy Kavu after that. But you can see here we still max out at around the 2 count, but I think here our distribution is looking more bigger upside here with Pygmy Kavu potentially drawing 4, 5, 6, or 7 cards as we look at sort of what this distribution would look like if it were normalized. I think it would look something like that, maybe like a parabolic curve there. Then let's jump to turn 7, which is a little bit of an interesting graph here. Let me scroll all the way to the right. We had one game where there was a Rendmaw Creaking Nest in play, and it was not dealt with and just made so many tokens. And so this particular game had 26 black creatures on the board as of turn 7. But here again, our distribution is going to get a little bit more wide, but our average is still going to be around that 3 mark. And I think again, there's probably a good chance that you're going to encounter between 0 and 2 creatures on turn 7, but there is a lot more upside to see as of turn 7. And then finally, turn 8, our distribution looks a little bit disappointing, I will say, because now our average goes further down to around the 2, and because we have a less of a sample size, it's not as filled out as those other graphs, but you can see the distribution here is looking somewhat disappointing as we really curve down into the, beyond the 3 count for those black creatures. So again, turn 8, I think, was really affected by late game board states where folks have been board wiped, their commanders have been removed once or twice, their tokens have been either, used to block, to chump block, and so they've died, or they've just died from other, various effects throughout the game. So let me talk about, I guess, my reaction to these results. I initially went into this experiment thinking that, wow, if you are, especially in a black heavy meta, this card is actually harmonized just with upside, and I see now why it is not nearly as popular as I initially thought it could be. Aristocrats decks, if they see this thing on the stack, might just sack all of their creatures afterwards, and so your opponents do sort of get the opportunity to respond with that ETB trigger on the stack. So I was optimistic going into this experiment, but now that we have a full set of data, I am less optimistic, but I will still play the card if we are in a flicker type of strategy or an ETB doubler type of strategy, just because I think that if you can squeeze more value out of it via doubling your ETB effects, then that is where you might want to play this. And also, if you are in a token heavy meta or a black heavy meta, then you might want to consider this as well. But just be aware that that lots of commanders get removed, lots of board waves come down between 4 or 6, and so this card does have the potential to leave you disappointed. So that is the video, guys. Thank you all for watching. Again, if you want to see a similar mathematical analysis for Subjugate the Hobbits, I will have that linked in the description below, and in the comments you can check that out as well. So here's where I'll wrap the video. Thank you again for watching, like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and I'll have those video recommendations on screen now.